I am so excited to be sitting with you today. Sir, would you please give us your name?
Name is Aaron Maybin.
Aaron Maybin.
Yes.
Aaron Maybin.
Yes.
Tell us something about your greatest accomplishments.
I think that I would have to start and say my greatest accomplishment. Everybody else might have different opinions of it, but my greatest accomplishment is being able to retire my parents, you know, and to move them, you know, down south to their new home, along with a couple of my grandparents, aunts and uncles and siblings, and allow them to really do what their true calling was, which was to minister. So they've opened up their own church down there in South Carolina, been going strong for some time now. But in terms of all of my accomplishments, that's the thing that I'm most proud of. The fact that after watching not just my father and mother, but my grandfather, you know, and so many other folks in my family spend their entire lives working to provide, you know, for me, for my siblings, and for so many other people, to be able to give them an opportunity to live the type of life that in my mind they're deserving of, you know, to be able to have peace and, you know, quiet and time to reflect and love on one another. You know, I think that that is a gift. And
so it sounds like family is very important to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we can't talk about Black History Month and don't value family. When did you discover your passion for your gift? And tell us what your gift is, and then your passion for that gift.
So I would say that I'm a man of many gifts. I think that the first love that I ever found is actually my truest love, which is the arts. You know, before I could form words and speak, I was creating. You know, I was stealing aluminum foil, Reynolds wrap, pretty much anything that was around my parents' or my grandparents' house. And I would use that to make action figures, toys, you know, anything that I could imagine. I would create it, or I would draw it, or I would mold it, I would sculpt it. And that was always how I communicated at a very young age. And then eventually I found sports, and that became a huge passion of mine. But all of those things were pieces of who I am. And a lot of times in life, people will try to force you into a box to declare you're just one thing, especially as a Black man. You're told that there are certain things, certain archetypes that it's okay for you to embody. And art was never really one that was honestly cool or something that it was like really popular for kids in my position to be doing. That's really a recent thing. Now you're starting to see, you know, when you look around in culture, artists starting to get that kind of respect and adoration, but that wasn't the case when I was younger. That was something that people would make fun of you for, you know, especially when, you know, I would start acting in school plays and I'm singing on the choir and I'm doing all of these things. But when I became an athlete, all of a sudden those things became what people were willing to tolerate. You know what I mean? Like, once you become the football player, the basketball player, this aggressive, you know what I mean? More conventional archetype of what people are comfortable seeing a Black boy be. You know, then they start to say, oh, it's pretty cool that he draws and stuff too. You know, but now, thankfully, we've gotten to this point where in my career and in my life, that's come a little bit more full circle back to the center. You know, I've gone away and, you know, played ball in college and professionally. But even while I was in the league, you know, my passion for the arts was still one of the strongest passions that I had. And I would spend my entire off season here in Baltimore, you know, in the schools, in the community, you know, throwing my own art shows and things like that. And, you know, it's just something that I realized at a certain point, football was a part of who I am, but art is me. You know what I mean? Art, literature, you know, my writing, my poetry, my photography, my paintings. It's much more than me just creating art for art's sake. You know, when you talk about narrative and you talk about storytelling and you talk about how we self-identify as people of color, and how we've always had to fight for the right to self-determine, you know, ever since the days of chattel slavery. Art has always been the way that we articulated our lived experiences here, whether it be through music or through the visual arts or through the language. That has always been how we've shown everybody else that we were still here, you know, that we existed. And we didn't just exist in the binary that white America dictated to us. We existed in our fullness. You know what I mean? We were lovers, you know, we were builders, we were creative thinkers, we were critical thinkers, we were engineers before, you know what I mean, any of these titles became something of note. And I think that my ability to recognize that in myself and realize that I was much more than what society told me I was, allowed me to live much more audaciously than most kids in my position. The first mural I ever did at 11 years old, which is no longer still standing, but will always be my favorite piece of public work that I've ever did, because of the fact that I was so young at the time. And I was so young that, and this was a 40 by 50 foot mural that I did on the back of a Habitat for Humanity's building that was right on North Avenue and St. Paul Street. And I can remember the scaffolding, you know, the people that I worked with to help get it done. I can remember climbing up on the scaffolding and working on that building, and there was a red light next to the building. There was like a Kentucky Fried Chicken / Taco Bell right across the street. So every red light, there would be 2 or 3 cars beeping at me. Get down from there. What are you doing up there? They thinking I'm just some young hoodlum from the area that's sneaking up on somebody's scaffold, you know, to do graffiti or to do all, and I have to tell people every red light, no, I'm supposed to be here. Like, I'm painting all of this. Like, I'm the one that's doing all, and that was the first time just seeing all of, as soon as I would say that, they didn't even believe me. Like, the other adults would have to come out and be like, no, like, this is the artist. Like, this is Aaron Maybin. He's gonna be really famous one day. And that was the first time I heard people speaking those type of affirmations all over me that wasn't tied to sports. Like, from a very young age, I was athletically gifted. I wasn't, you know, the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, but I was enough of all of those things where I was always one of the better athletes on any team that I played on. So there were always people that saw promise in me as an athlete. They would say, you know, you got a chance to be really good one day. You might be able to go to college or go to the NFL. But that experience painting that mural at 11 years old was the first time that people were telling me, no, you're gonna be famous as an artist because this gift that you have is very unique. So that's always gonna be, have a special place in my heart.
That's amazing. Who or what would you say has mostly inspired you to progress along your journey?
I would have to say our people. I would have to say, and I can't just say my parents, I can't just say, you know, my immediate family, cousins and all of that. I've always been inspired immensely by, you know, people in my family, people in my community. But when you look at Black folks all across the diaspora, wherever we may be, you know, it's impossible not to draw inspiration from the reality of what we've had to overcome just to be here, for one. And on top of that, in spite of all of the systems that were literally built to subjugate us, none of it, in spite of how insidious it all is, in spite of how brutal and intentional it all is, no weapons formed against us have been able to prosper. We're still here. In spite of all of the things that we still have to organize against and overcome, we're still here. We're still loving on each other. We're still building. We're still creating and sustaining community. You know, we're still America's greatest import, export, or economic tool. You know, black people in this country have accomplished so much with so little. And the fact that so many of those stories aren't told always bothered me. And once I got to a certain age, I started to understand that I didn't have to let it bother me. Certain stories haven't been told, so I'm supposed to tell them. Certain things haven't been created, so I'm supposed to build them. You know, and that is added inspiration to the work that encapsulates. You know, when you're able to see what our people accomplish every day just to live, just to exist, just to raise children, just to keep bills paid and bellies fed and lights on, you know, there's so much to be admired about that and be inspired by about that. And when you see the evidence of what can be accomplished, you know, through that love and through that hard work, through that dedication, it kind of causes you to live your life a little bit differently. It causes you to poke your chest out and to walk with a little bit more pride and to move with a little bit more intention when you're building and creating the things that you want to see exist in the world. So, yeah, out of all things, I think that our people, black people, wherever they may be, all across the diaspora, from the Caribbean, you know what I mean, to the homeland, from, you know, Asia to Europe, you know, all of these places, wherever we are, we found ways to achieve greatness. We found ways to improve everything about the environment that we were inserted into.
So the very thing that perhaps would have stamped the gift out became the very thing that motivated to keep on growing.
Absolutely.
To keep on going. What would you say would be your greatest challenge along your journey?
Being a living, breathing example of what I talk about or preach, I would say. I can't speak for anybody else, but I can say I can speak for what I see. And what I see when I look around is I see a lot of talking that isn't usually followed by action. I see a lot of great ideas that aren't followed by the kind of commitment that is necessary to bring those ideas to bear. It's a lot easier to tell somebody you love them than to show them. It's a lot easier to tell somebody something needs to exist than to build it. It's a whole lot easier to complain about a problem rather than going out there and rolling your sleeves up and getting your hands dirty. So the biggest challenge is I don't ever want people to look at me as a talker. I want people to see my actions and see how I'm living life and see the things that I'm actually doing. And I want that to inspire people to say, I want to get involved. I want to be a similar light in my household, in my community. And I don't think that happens by telling people what you are. You have to show them. So every day, my biggest challenge to myself is to hold myself to that internal code that I abide by, you know, and to make sure that when I speak about it to others, that I ask them to hold me accountable to that. So if you see me walking outside of this space that I've told you that I want to occupy, hold me to that standard. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to hold your sons and your daughters to that standard. I'm going to hold my peers to that standard. And if I'm going to be challenging others, I shouldn't be challenging anybody else to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
That sounds like family to me.
Absolutely. But I think that one of the biggest problems in our community right now is we don't act like we know that we're still family. Even if we don't share the same blood, you're my brother. And we're never going to be able to accomplish any of the things that we say that we want as a community until we start operating and living in that love ethos. It is so hard to do that because we're living in a time where toxicity is currency. You can be a rich buffoon. You know what I mean? Like if you are out there parroting certain ideas and displaying certain behaviors, you will get celebrated before it. You will get celebrated for it way before you will get celebrated for being an honorable person. And that's tough because we live in a very monkey see, monkey do type of environment. So people will see you make a fool of yourself and get rewarded for it and say, you know what I think I need to do? I need to go get some of that money and some of that attention that he's able to get.
Be more ridiculous.
Exactly. And now we get to a point where we brag about our own ignorance, where our men lean into these archetypes that society has put on us that are actually harmful to our community, our households, and our relationships. You know, our kids aren't being raised to be full and complete human beings because we're telling them that they're supposed to turn off certain elements of their humanity just to survive in a world that doesn't value that humanity. You know,
that's why you got to know who you are.
Absolutely.
You got to know who you are, and you got to know your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this: during African American Black History Month, what historical figure do you most admire, or do you most gravitate towards?
Fred Hampton.
Thinking? Okay, break it down for me.
I think that everybody knows about Malcolm and Martin. Obviously, I immortalize them in murals. I write about them a great deal, but I think that a lot of times when Black History Month comes, whenever an opportunity comes for us to talk about those figures that are so important to the journey of Black people in this country, we leave out the people that actually challenge the establishment in ways that the establishment wasn't ready for. And one thing that I've always admired about people like Fred Hampton and Stokely Carmichael and so many others was their ability to organize and galvanize. You know, when you look at the fact that we have, free breakfast in school right now, of course that is always traced back to the Free Breakfast for Children program that the Black Panther Party had and operated. But I look at Fred Hampton as somebody who, at 20 years old, was the leader of the NAACP and was the founder of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party at that very young age. And you had grown men and women that were really to follow behind this kid with these ambitious ideas. And you had Jesse Jackson and these other folks going around talking about a rainbow coalition, but he was actually bold enough to go into the white enclaves, into the space where the KKK was organizing and say, hey, look, we got the same beef with the same government. How are we going to organize together in spite of the fact that you don't like us and we don't like you? You know what I'm saying? Understanding that in America, the whole way that the system works, that capitalism continues and that subjugation of marginalized communities continues, is when you can divide those marginalized communities up and turn them against one another. So to have the boldness to radically love your Blackness and the Blackness of those who you organize with, but to also have enough intelligence and enough of that love ethos to understand that unless you extend that same love and that same ideology to the people even that you don't agree with politically, none of us are able to work out of our way out of this situation. And as long as tyranny is going to continue, as long as the oppressed, stay divided, and the people at the top stay unified. So I've always been one of those people that believes that gender should never divide us, religion should never divide us, partisan politics should never divide us. In spite of those differences, we have to find ways of working with one another. We have to find ways of loving on each other, even when it hurts, even when it's not convenient. And in my opinion, people like Fred and Stokely and so many others exemplified that.
This is absolutely powerful. And let me just say this, that it's clear to me that you continue the trajectory of success, even among Black people. As a young man, with the drive and the passion that you have, and the determination to raise up even your own, to see them accomplish what they can accomplish, even if they don't think they can. And you're there to help show them the way. And you're an example of it. And so it's been a privilege.
It's always an honor. It's always an honor. Absolutely.
And to declare that we are about a good work. And I like what you said, that we all have our different arenas that we operate in. But it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
It's together.
We talk about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and we talk about the spiritual warfare that goes on, but a lot of times when we talk about that war, we don't acknowledge how war gets waged. You don't just have a Navy. You know what I mean? You don't just have an Air Force. You know what I'm saying? You need your infantry, you need your cavalry, you need your Air Force, you need your Navy. But you need all of those people to know their job and to stay in that lane. You don't need the Navy to try to do the Air Force's job. You don't need your infantry unit to try to do what your cavalry should be doing. So at the end of the day, I think that one of the biggest issues is you got a generation of way too many generals and not enough soldiers, and way too many people that want to be leaders that don't want to serve. And I think that when you learn how to become a servant first, you become fit to be a leader. But you can't do that whole thing backwards. So my whole thing is my father's advice that he always used to give me in life is to keep the main thing the main thing. So if the main thing is love, if the main thing is community, if the main thing is education, if the main thing is organizing, then we have to center that and focus on that. And there should never be a time where I allow my own ego or experiences or perspective to get in the way of those things. So, and again, it's a lot easier to talk about these things than to actually do it. You know what I mean? It's a whole lot easier to talk about love than to show it. It's a whole lot easier to, to talk about a great relationship than to have one. Everybody wants to be relationship goals. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I don't care about you perceiving me as having a great relationship. I want to be partnered with somebody that's actually happy and fulfilled. You know what I mean? And in order for me to do that, that requires me stepping outside of my own self and my own perspective in a way that is uncomfortable. We don't talk about that enough. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. It's very hard. It's very thankless. It's very tedious. But if the reality that we say that we're fighting for is actually worth living in, then it's got to be worth the sacrifice. You know what I mean? We can't talk about there needing to be this great, awakening and this new, and not be willing to do the work necessary to bring that to bear. So I'm just trying to be a good steward of this position. I understand and I appreciate what God has done in my life to allow me to do things for others. And I understand that somebody in my position can be a great blessing or a great detriment to certain people. So I want to be a good steward of that. And I want to make sure that I honor those that help to develop and raise me by how I sow into, this new generation of kids that we have coming up now.
Well, I celebrate where you are, but I also celebrate where I see you going. And just know we're in your corner. We're going to get back together again. We're going to continue this maybe in a different forum, but we're going to continue to do this with some others to be able to share some of all that gold that's buried inside of you that's coming out and being discovered.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this here.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.